Now we have a report coming to us from our desk of unforeseen consequences. On November 7th, DC Comics announced that they would be selling individual comics directly through Kindle, Apple, and Nook stores instead of selling it through the Comixology app. Now, on the surface of things, this doesn't appear to be a big change. The comics were already available on Apple and Android devices through Comixology. The price of the comics would remain unchanged and would have parity of the price of the comics in comic book stores. Even the software engine that was being used was developed by Comixology. Basically, we had a name change. Instead of Comixology presenting DC Comics, we have now DC Comics presented by Comixology. And based on the press releases at the time, there doesn't seem to be any intention on having changes of services, just having DC being able to promote its own name in its own space. And yet, with this simple name change, we had two things introduced that DC really didn't want to offer. The first came down to the release date of the comics. See, DC has an agreement with the comic shops to never release online comics before the shops have a chance to open their doors and sell the comics themselves. Comixology would always release DC's comics midday on Wednesday, long after the comic shops have stocked their shelves and opened their doors for business. But when direct distribution with Apple, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble, the precision timing that was available in Comixology is not available on those stores. The basic upshot is now consumers have a potential to buy DC Comics hours before comic book stores even open, basically at 12:01 in the morning. The more basic upshot of this is DC had some splaining to do to the comic book stores. A week after the comics went live and the timing glitch became known, DC sent out a memo to retailers essentially stating that they are very sorry about the timing, but they really shouldn't worry because according to their data, all the sales that happened before 12 were out of the country, not in the country, so really the comic book shops shouldn't worry about it and shouldn't be upset at all. So problem solved, right? Retailers just have to trust what DC says, that they should not be worried, based on data that DC has internally and is not sharing with anyone. And if they believe that, DC also has a really sweet deal on a bridge in Brooklyn for them. So, nothing else could go wrong, right? I mean, the relationship with the customers should be solid. Surely there can't be any problems. They're just changing from Comixology storefront to Amazon and Kindle storefront. I mean, the only real difference from moving from Comixology to, say, Kindle is the convenience things. There's phone support now, there's single sign-in purchases, and of course, Kindle offers a 7-day return policy on all products. And here we have our second problem. As noted by the Comic Beat, the switch to Amazon stores mean that you are now able to download a comic, read it, and return it for a full refund with no questions asked according to Amazon's policy. Now this policy has never been a problem for Amazon that deals primarily in books. But where your average book would take a bit longer than 7 days to read, for most people, a 25-page comic doesn't last over an hour and a half. And with price parity with the comic book shops, meaning that each comic is $4, there's a pretty strong incentive to game the system. Now, it should be said that there hasn't been any reporting of large-scale abuse of this, and everyone says that this is a really bastard thing to do in general, so I guess DC's okay, because we all know on the internet there are no bastards. We are all quite well behaved here, and no one ever tries to get things through less than moral ways. By the way, did I mention DC's deal on the bridge in Brooklyn? Sounds pretty sweet, right? The problem of returns is actually a different version of the timing problem, and that's the basic problem of DC's dependency on the direct market, aka comic book stores. Every Kindle book you can buy at a cheaper price than the print version, with the exception of comic books. When you buy a comic book online, it must be the exact same price as the print comic book in the stores. To keep the comic book stores happy, they have set up a price parity scheme This price parity scheme is holding DC back. DC cannot develop the web as a major distribution point because they are charging print prices online. And they can't charge online prices because then they immediately lose their print distribution. However, we may be seeing a change in this dynamic. As with the timing memo, which basically told comic book shops that DC was going to do whatever the heck they wanted. Mind you, they did say that in very polite terms, but that's what they were saying. DC told the comic book stores to go get stuffed with the timing issue. They were going to do it. This is a first for DC, and it may be the start of a true transition to online for the comic publishing company.